All right, so looking at these translations here, again, those two stages of translation. Stage one, analyze the Hebrew text. First step of that is anticipate a verb. It'll help you parse. Then parse out your verb. How do I parse the verb? Well, find out if you have any suffixes at this point. No suffixes, that indicates that we've got a 3ms form. What form of the verb offers no suffixes? Well, the Cal Perfect is the only one we've learned so far, and within that, just the 3ms form. So I can now parse this out as Cal Perfect 3ms. I can identify my root, Zion, Kaf, Resh, and I can provide an inflected meaning for this, which would be remembered. All right, so next, number two, we're on translation two. Second word is ha'ish. Now, whenever I see a Hebrew word that starts with a hey, I think to myself, maybe that's a definite article. Now, I can confirm that by finding a patak dagesh, but I don't have that here. Of course, the reason why I don't is because the aleph can't take the dagesh, and so the dagesh drops and the patak lengthens to compensate. So when I see a hey kametz aleph, well, that's a pretty good indication that I've got the definite article. And I can prove it's the definite article if, by taking the article off, that is removing the hey kametz, I see a Hebrew word there, which I do, ish. Ish means man or husband. So this word is a noun, it's definite, it's masculine singular, and it means the man. Now, it's a noun. I'm not done yet. I have to ask myself, what function does this noun have in this sentence? Is this functioning as the subject, or is it functioning as the direct object? The reason why I have to ask that is because a noun could function either way. If it's the subject, this means the man remembered. And let's just cover up that answer. The man remembered if this is the subject. Remember, we only use that pronoun he if the Hebrew doesn't give us a more explicit pronoun to use. So we would translate it subject, verb, he remembered. But if this is the direct object, we would translate this as he remembered the man. And in that translation, this man wouldn't be doing anything. He would be the one who was remembered. So you can see that that's two different ways to translate this that has very different meanings. If you just stick with the Hebrew word order and just push it into English, you're going to have incorrect translations. The Hebrew word order here would translate, he remembered the man, but that's not what this sentence is saying. How do I know that this is not the direct object? I know this is not the direct object because the word is definite, but it lacks the definite direct object marker. If this were the direct object and it's definite, it's going to have that definite direct object marker. Okay, so the fact that that marker is missing tells me that this definite noun is not the direct object. So what else can it be? Well, so far we've only really learned two functions of a noun in a Hebrew sentence. That's the subject and the direct object. So if we know it's not the direct object, it has to be the subject. And that is the end of stage one, but now we go to stage two, which is finding out what English needs for the translation. So I ask my buddy English, I say, hey, English, what do you need to start a sentence? English says, I need a subject. That's what I start with. Hebrew's crazy, but I know what's going on. Subjects come first. So I say, okay, be right back. Let me come back over here to my sentence. All right, where's my subject? I need to give my subject to English. Okay, the man is my subject. So boom, I go over here and I say, okay, English, here you go. The man, there's your subject. English, what do you need after the subject? English says, I need the main verb next. So I come over here, where's my main verb? Zachar. Okay, Zachar, I translated that as remembered. So now I can put remembered in there and I'm done. But you have to go through both sides of that to avoid the mistranslation of he remembered the man. Okay, it's only once you figure out what the proper word order in English is that you're going to be able to translate this correctly. All right. Now, I will give you one exception to that. Sometimes we sing some really old hymns where the subject comes after the verb. Those are exceptions. Okay. I wish I had an example to think of, but generally speaking, in English, we need the subject first. So make sure that whatever the subject is, you put that first, then the verb, then you can add whatever direct objects you need. All right. If we look at number 3 here, it's a very similar situation, except the subject has been fronted to the beginning. All right, and so the subject here isn't even really necessary. This pronoun isn't necessary because the verb form tells us it's 1CS. So there might be some sort of emphasis going on here. Why on earth he just keeps it as a simple I remembered instead of that weird I, not anyone else remembered? I have no idea why he can translate well here but not there. But the point is, there may be some sort of emphasis on I here. But this is the translation. You don't add parentheses or anything like that. I remembered, it would be the same if it was just Zacharti, but by putting ani in there and by fronting ani, that probably indicates that there might be some sort of emphasis in the subject. All right, number 4, pretty straightforward. It's just like number 1, except we've gone to 3FS. Number 5, pretty much the same. We've just added a subject here. Again, I know just by looking at this that it's the subject and not the direct object. How do I know that? Because it's definite, but it doesn't have the definite direct object marker. That's how I know. So this must be the subject. Now I can confirm that it's the subject because if it's the subject, it has to match the verb. It has to agree with the verb in gender, number, and person, which it does. So this is perfectly well translated. But again, if I just translate it as she remembered the woman, that's a completely different sentence than the woman remembered. So again, the English side is What part of the sentence does English need first? It needs the subject. So let's go find the subject wherever it is in the sentence. It doesn't matter if it's the last word of 20. Find the subject and put it at the beginning of your English translation. Then get your verb, and then get whatever other parts of the sentence are there and put them in where they need to go. But always figure out what your subject is before you start translating. Number 6, again, it's just the verbal form, but here it's the 2MP, so it's you all remembered. Number 7, 3CP, so if this is my subject, it has to agree in gender and number. Common verbs can take masculine or feminine, so there's no disagreement there, but it is plural, so my subject has to be plural, and sure enough it is. Number 8, we've got the same exact thing. We just switch from the masculine men to the feminine women, but again, the 3CP form can take masculine or feminine, so no change needed here. Number 9, we have batach. We've got the masculine singular subject, bain. It happens to be definite, but we know that this is the subject and not the direct object because we see that it's definite and it lacks the definite direct object marker. Right, so that has to be the subject. It has to be the son trusted rather than he trusted the son. If this was he trusted the son, you would have the definite direct object marker. Number 10, same thing, except now our subject, instead of the masculine singular habain, it's the feminine singular habat, the daughter. And so as a result, we have to change our verb form to agree with the feminine singular subject. We go from 3ms for the son to 3fs for the daughter. Number 11, very similar to the ani pronoun above, but here it's ata. This is 2ms. So we have the 2ms form of the verb. Number 12, we have atain. This is the 2fp. So we have the 2fp form of the verb. And then number 13, again, just the verbal form, 1cp, betachnu. That means that we trusted. Number 14, we have halach 3ms with the masculine singular subject. Again, it's definite with no definite direct object marker, so hanavi is the subject rather than the direct object. The prophet walked rather than he walked the prophet. Number 15, we have haim halahu. Again, we've got an explicit subject pronoun that is sort of superfluous because we could determine that the subject was, well, maybe not masculine plural, but we could determine that the subject was third person plural just from the verbal form. So perhaps haim being added in and being fronted, perhaps that has some sort of emphatic value maybe. But again, those are basically the general principles here is step 1 of the, well, 2 stages to translating. Stage 1, analyze the Hebrew. So the first step in analyzing the Hebrew is anticipating a verb. And then once you find the verb, parsing it correctly, giving the inflected meaning, and then moving on to the next word. And you'll do that word by word by word. But if you do that word by word, and then you just put a period at the end of your translation, that's not a translation. You then have to go back over it in English and say, what does English use first? It uses the subject, so go find your subject and add it in, that sort of thing. All right, any questions about A before we jump to the next section? Let's see. B, D, and H. All right. So next we've got B. All right. Now this one's a little tricky. This is a good one to start off with here. Number 1, we've got lakach sus. All right. So again, step 1 of translation, the Hebrew analysis part, expect a verb. What do you know? I've got a verb. All right. Now I need to parse that verb. How many letters does a Hebrew verbal root have? 3. How many do I have here? I have 3. What do you know? That probably is my verbal root, especially since we haven't done weak verbs yet. There is no suffix. So the only form of the Cal Perfect that has no suffix is the Cal Perfect 3ms. So I've now parsed out my verb, and I will now give the inflected meaning. The gloss would be take, capture, seize, something like that. But remember, this is Cal Perfect. So it's going to be took, or caught, or captured, or seized, past tense. Now that I've fully analyzed this word, I can move on to this word. Again, this is my main verb. I probably need to note that in my analysis. Now I move on to this word. All right, sus, we know that that's a noun. Sus is masculine singular. It is indefinite. Now we have to ask, what is its function in the sentence? So far, we've only learned 2 functions that a noun will have in a sentence. It'll be either the subject or it will be the direct object. Next week, when we do prepositions, we'll learn that a noun might be the object of a preposition. That's fine, but we haven't even gotten there yet. So right now, there's only 2 functions that this noun can have. It's either the subject of the verb or it's the object of the verb. How do we determine which it is? You might say, well, it doesn't have the definite direct object marker, so it must be the subject. Not so fast. We wouldn't expect the definite direct object marker to appear on a word if the word isn't definite. There's no definite article here. This is not a definite noun. So it could still be the direct object. It's just not a definite direct object. That definite direct object marker will not appear even when you have a direct object if that direct object is not definite. So we can't rule it out there. Well, what about if we compare it to the verb and see if there's agreement? Because if there's no agreement between the two, then we know that it can't be the subject. So the verb is 3ms, the noun is masculine singular. Well, it agrees, so we still can't rule out subject. At this point, all you can do is rely on the meaning, the lexical value of the 2 words, and ask which function makes more sense. So does it make more sense that a horse took, or does it make more sense that he took a horse? Horses don't have hands, so it's hard for them to take anything. Moreover, the word took in English. Now, we're just talking about English right now. In English, the word took or caught or captured or seized, those words are not really intransitive. They sort of require an object. You can't automatically assume that the same is true for a Hebrew equivalent. So just because took and capture and seized, just because those are never intransitive in English, doesn't necessarily mean that the Hebrew word will never be intransitive. But we can kind of figure out just from our translation that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to say a horse took or a horse captured. Capturing, just the meaning of that word implies an object. So it makes more sense to say he captured a horse than to say a horse captured, period. As far as the spelling, the form goes, all of that, morphologically speaking, there's nothing that tells you that Seuss has to be the direct object rather than the subject. We have to rely on the lexical value of these words to come to that conclusion. Now, sometimes even the lexical value, the meaning of the words, won't decide it. In that case, you have to rely on the broader context to see what makes most sense. But at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to, we have a lot of options here. Which option makes more sense in the context? All right. So let's keep looking at these. The difference between number 1 and number 2 is here, the horse is definite. And so, because it's the direct object, we get the definite direct object marker. The only difference between 2 and 3 is that we get the et particle in 3 instead of 8, but it doesn't change the meaning at all. The two sentences mean exactly the same thing. All right. So why have 2 different options? That's just the way language works. There's a lot of variety. Sometimes people do things differently from other people. Number 4, here we've got a different verb, shalach, and a different object, hana'ar, but the same structure. Verb, et particle, definite direct object. Number 5, verb, et particle, definite direct object. Number 6 is again like number 1. It's more ambiguous. We have our verb, shema, and then we have a noun, but we don't know morphologically, just from the spelling, we can't tell whether the noun is the subject or the object. We can't even tell by the word order, because in both cases, the word order would be the same. We would expect the subject to be right after the verb, but if there is no subject, then we would expect the direct object to be right after the verb. So even that doesn't help. Again, we have to rely on the lexical value of the words, on the meaning of the words, to figure out what this probably, how this should probably be translated. So as we translate through here, Shema, I have 3 root letters, so this is probably my root, no suffix, so this is Cal Perfect 3MS, and here the inflected meaning would be heard. So it might be it heard, it might be he heard. We don't know yet because we don't know what the subject is. So then we go to the next word. Okay, it is a noun. It does agree with the verb, so it could be the subject. It's masculine singular, just like the verb is. But once we translate these words, one makes more sense than the other. So the gloss here would be word, so a word or a message or something like that. So let's translate it as if Devar were the subject. That would give us a word heard. If we translate Devar as the object, that would give us he or it heard a word or a message. Well, that one makes a whole lot more sense than the previous one. It makes more sense that Devar is the object. He heard a message or he heard a word versus a word heard or a message heard. Messages don't have ears, hard for them to hear. So again, it doesn't come down to the spelling. It doesn't even come down to the word order. It ultimately comes down to understanding the meaning of each word and what the relationship between those two meanings most likely is. Now, when we add in the definite article, well, then it gets a lot easier, because here, when the object is definite, we're going to get the definite direct object marker. The next one, we switch our object to melech, but it's pretty much the same. Here we've got et instead of 8, but it's going to be the same, translation's down here. It's going to be the same idea. He heard the word, he heard the king. All right, so that is section B. Let's take a look at D here.
When it comes to the definite direct object marker, is there a rhyme or reason why you get the 8 or the et?
Not that I know of, and not Futato also says that there's not really any. He doesn't say whether or not there's a reason. He says there's no difference in meaning, and I think he says that somewhere like 90 to 95% of the time it's going to be et rather than 8. But I don't know of any reason why it would be different, other than the fact that what we have in the Hebrew scriptures was probably written over a period of at least 1,000 years or so, and so it may be historical. Like at one point, honestly, I don't even know if that makes sense, because that makef, I don't know whether the makef would have been part of the original writing, or if that's something that the Masoretic scribes added in when they did the vowels. Because if it's something they added in later, then there would be no difference in the original text, and it would just be a Masoretic difference for some reason, which would make even less sense. But I don't know of a reason why you would get one or the other. I think it's just variety within the language.
That's always directly in front of the direct object, right?
Yes. All right, so here's the fun one. Section D. Again, if you had all 4 of these sentences, or any 4 of these sentences on a quiz, the answer for each one of them should be the boy gave the garment. Okay. The only reason why, well, I'm sorry, there's no negative on this one. So let's pretend that we're just looking at the first, or 2, 3, and 4, because these have the negative particle, but the first one doesn't. All right. So if you see number 2, number 3, or number 4 on a quiz, the answer for any and all of them, the answer for each of them should be the boy did not give the garment. It should not be the boy did not give the garment, he kept it. It should not be the boy did not give the garment, the girl did. It should not be the boy did not give the garment, he gave the shoes. The only reason Futato is adding this parenthetical information is to bring out the fact that in number 2, the word that is negated is give. Giving is not what the boy did with the clothing. He may have done something else with the clothing, but whatever he did with the clothing, it was not giving. If you wanted to pronounce this translation, it might be something like, the boy did not give the garment, which sort of implies that perhaps he did something else with it. But we are talking about the boy, and we are talking about the garment. We're just not talking about him giving the garment. In number 3, it was not the boy who gave the garment. So we are talking about giving, and we are talking about the garment. We're just not talking about the boy doing it, which sort of implies that maybe someone else did, like, for example, maybe the girl did. And then number 4, the garment is not what the boy gave. We are talking about the boy, and we are talking about him giving something. It's just that we're not talking about him giving the garment. So perhaps he gave something else, like, for example, the shoes. Again, this is a terribly confusing part of the lesson. And like I mentioned before, that's probably why it doesn't really show up on the quiz. But that's what's going on here. This parenthetical information is not in the Hebrew. It's just kind of given there to sort of explain the emphasis. All right, and then finally, H. Let's take a look here. And again, you've got the translation, so I'm just going to note some of the more important information. Number 1 here, we've got our verb at the beginning, just like we expect. There is no suffix, so it's 3ms. We've got 2 nouns. We've got hamelech and we've got et ha malkut. So which one's the subject and which one's the object? Well, we know that et ha malkut is the object because we see the direct object marker attached to it. So that settles it. What else would hamelech be doing there? I mean, we don't have a double direct object because even if we had a double direct object, both definite direct objects would have et. We don't have that here. The only other function that hamelech can serve that we've learned so far is subject. So the only thing we can do with this is label it as the subject. Now, so far we've only analyzed the Hebrew. We have not translated yet. Because if we translated at this point, it would say, he remembered the king, the kingdom, and that is not good English. What we have to do now that we've analyzed the Hebrew is we have to go to the English side and say, hey, English, what do you need first? English says, I need the subject. So we come back over here and we say, which one is the subject? We already decided that's hamelech. So now we translate hamelech, the king, into English first. Here you go. Here's your subject. What do you need next, English? I need the verb next. All right, so we come back to our Hebrew. Where's the verb? We already decided that that's zachar. So we say, here's your verb, remembered. What do you need next, English? What else you got? Well, I got a direct object. Perfect, bring that over. So then we take ha malkut and we bring it over. But this is how we maintain a correct word order in English, is instead of just putting a period at the end of all of our interpretive glosses, we actually ask ourselves, what's the subject? What's the verb? What's the direct object? How do these words work together in the sentence? That's what allows us to come up with a proper translation in English. So again, the rest of these are pretty straightforward, especially when there's only 2 words. But you've got some ambiguity in number 3, ha-lacha ha'aim. Is this she walked the mother, as if the mother was a pet that needed walking? Or is this the mother walked? Well, it's certainly the mother walked because the mother is definite, and if it were the direct object, it would have the direct object marker. That's not the case here. What about number 2? Isn't number 2 a little ambiguous because it's neither definite nor does it have, I mean, if it's not definite, how do we know if it's the subject or if it's the object? Well, we know because of the agreement, or I should say disagreement, between ha-na'ar and lakakti. Lakakti is 1 CS. Now, it's true that na'ar is singular, but na'ar is not a first-person word. There really aren't any first-person words other than first-person pronouns, ani and anochi, and then in the plural, anachnu. Na'ar is third person. I mean, it doesn't really have a person, but it's going to go with, it can't be the subject of a first-person verb is the idea. So we don't even need the direct object. We don't even, or the definite direct object marker or any definite articles. We can tell that this does not agree with the verb, therefore it cannot be the subject. So this must be, I captured or I took a boy or a servant. Let's go down number 4, shalhu ha-elim. So here, 3CP, which means our subject has to be plural. Elim is plural, navi is singular. So elim must be the subject. And, well, here we've got our 8. So 8 indicates that hanavi is the direct object. Number 5 is a little ambiguous, shema kohen davar. So shema, 3ms, but Kohen and Devar are both masculine singular. So which one is the subject and which one's the object? In this one, again, you basically have to rely on the lexical value. What do they mean? What makes most sense with that meaning? Does it make sense for a word to hear a priest? Or does it make more sense for a priest to hear a word? It makes more sense if the priest is the subject who is hearing and Devar is the object that is being heard. So that's how we determine English word order. What's your subject? Kohen. Okay, bring that one over first. Don't bring Shema over first. Don't bring Devar over first. Bring the subject Kohen over first, a priest. Now what do you need? I need the verb. Don't bring Devar over yet. Bring the verb over. Shema. Here you go, heard. Now bring that object over. All right, and then of course number 6 here, we've got lakaktem et hasusot. So tem, this is second person. Susot is not going to be second person. Now it does match in, it doesn't match in gender though. It matches in number, both are plural, but susot is feminine and the verb is masculine. So you know that this cannot be the subject, even if you didn't have et or ha there. But of course, at this point you should be, when you look at this sentence, et should be one of the first things that jumps out at you. This is your direct object. You all captured the mares. All right, that's it for Futato. Any questions or anything else you want to go over?
No, anything specific.
All right, Jonathan, I don't know if you have access to your microphone. If there is something you want to go over, please type it in the chat if you don't have access. But if not,
I've got access. I'm good.
okay. All right, sounds good. Well, thanks for coming in, guys. I'm going to leave you a brief reminder here just as a heads up. I will post this in the announcement for next week. Actually, not next week, because next week is Unit 7. In Unit 8, when we do the midterm, you will need to have an in-person proctor for that, but it can be any adult. We used to have restrictions on who it could be, but with the pandemic, it just needs to be an adult who's alive, who can verify. They will send me an email saying, I was with so-and-so for the whole exam. They didn't use any resources, and they didn't sneak out of the room while they were taking it or anything like that. Just have them email it to me. But again, for Unit 8, I will put that in the announcements just as a reminder. But I know we do have some students who work ahead, so just want to make sure to mention that. But other than that, we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks.
Take care.